Appreciate that discussion. And, I reflected on something Kevin said, stuck with me, and that is that we collaborate on the hard stuff. And I think that is something, having done ecosystem development work nationally, if I knew one thing that distinguishes North Carolina, it's that we can collaborate on the hard stuff. But being able to do that takes data. And so let's turn to some data as we did last year. And here to take us there is Greg Brown, Executive Director of North Carolina's leading business policy think tank, the Frank Hawkins Keenan Institute of Private Enterprise at UNC Chapel Hill. Incidentally, I am proud to serve the Keenan Institute of Private Enterprise on the board of advisors. And through that experience, I can tell you firsthand that Greg is leading a great team producing actionable research. And I'm thrilled that you're speaking with us today, Greg. Will you walk us through your research on the economic shock we've just experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tom. Good morning, everyone. As Tom said, I'm Greg Brown. I'm Executive Director of the Keenan Institute of Private Enterprise and a Professor of Finance at UNC's Keenan Flagler Business School. And I'm truly pleased and honored to be with you all this morning. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Keenan Institute, we're, as Tom said, a nonprofit business policy think tank, and we operate through UNC's Keenan Flagler Business School. We were founded about 35 years ago with the belief that private enterprise is the cornerstone of a prosperous and free society. We work to develop and promote innovative market-based solutions to vital economic issues, and written into our mission statement is that we seek to foster the entrepreneurial spirit to stimulate economic prosperity, to improve the lives of people in North Carolina, across the country, and around the world. So it's no exaggeration to say that the Keenan Institute it has entrepreneurship as core to what we do. So I want to start by giving you a very brief overview of what we've been up to in 2020 and what's ahead for 2021. And we can go ahead and move to the second slide now, Dominic. So the way we operate, most of our work is done with affiliated centers. So these are folks at UNC, but also other top global research and business and policy organizations. We're really proud to count NC IDEA as one of those partners. As Tom said, he serves on our board at the Keenan Institute, but we're also fortunate to have a grant, ecosystem grant, that provides support for what we think is game-changing entrepreneurship scholars program that's run by our affiliated entrepreneurship center. And so this is a program that invests in entrepreneurship students from underrepresented backgrounds and identities, and provides financial support and one-on-one connections to mentors and coaches and industry experts. And this is really just one of the innovative programs that we operate through the Keenan Institute and the Entrepreneurship Center. We're excited about some other new things that we're launching this year and are on the slate for next year. So we just recently launched the Scale School. So the idea behind this is to support leaders of organizations that are in growth mode and offer short courses on topics such as B2B sales and negotiation and succession planning. We're in the midst of planning to host VC University Live, which will be in the spring next year in conjunction with the National Venture Capital Association and Berkeley School of Law. And one of our most successful efforts around entrepreneurship has been the Frontiers of Entrepreneurship Conference. So we're now planning for the fourth annual conference. So this is a two-day conference that brings together top academic researchers, policymakers, and practitioners to really kind of dig into what are the most prominent and important current topics in entrepreneurship, and then to really kind of chart the course for future research. So the action out of this is that the conference actually awards research grants to scholars to support what we think are the most interesting ideas that come out of the conference discussion. So it's really kind of a workshop based with follow-up to research conference. So as you might expect, we're planning for a virtual event in 2021, and that's going to take place in April 22nd and 23rd. So be on the lookout for more information on that. Can move to the next slide now, Dominic. So a thing that also has come out of the conference we just launched this year is what we call the Trends in Entrepreneurship report. And the idea here is to try and translate some of the research that's being done by academics into more accessible and actionable findings for the broader entrepreneurial community. So, those of you that read academic papers know academics write for academics, and it's not often the really useful information that people that are making decisions in the real world need. So the idea here is like, let's curate that information, pull it together, and provide it out to a broader community of people that can use it. So we've just released our latest quarterly update on this last week, and this is an issue that is going to focus on the value of immigrant entrepreneurs in the U.S., as well as barriers to building diverse and inclusive entrepreneurial teams. So these are topics I know we're going to be digging into more today and tomorrow. So I would really encourage you to go to frontiers.unc.edu and download your copy. There's a lot of really interesting information that's been pulled out of the literature and citations to lots of other research as well. So go ahead and go to the next slide there. So kind of moving into the current situation a little bit more, of course, as we've seen, the pandemic has really had devastating consequences for both the physical and economic health of so many people all around the world. When the pandemic hit here in North Carolina back in March, we tried to move pretty quickly to study the challenges, provide some context behind the data that was coming out, start generating some reports, explore solutions to kind of these unprecedented issues that we're facing as a part of the pandemic. I'm really proud of the work that the Institute and affiliated centers have done to inform educators, policymakers, practitioners, the press about really a wealth of topics related to the pandemic. I want to give a special shout out to the folks at NC Growth and the Entrepreneurship Center, who hosted more than 1,000 business leaders and government policymakers to help them navigate economic challenges that they're facing as part of the pandemic. And one of the things they did that I want to also make people aware of is they compiled a comprehensive online small business and economic development resource guide. And so I'd encourage you to check that out, and if it's something that's of interest to you, or if you know people who might benefit from a curated set of resources to help small businesses. So go ahead and let's move to the next slide. Another thing that we did, and this is what I'm going to spend most of my remaining time talking about, is we pulled together a group of business leaders in North Carolina to try to understand more what was happening kind of on the ground with different businesses, try to analyze what were increasingly complex issues around restarting the state's economy after the shutdown. So this was a group of about 20 business leaders, pretty wide variety of industries and geographies and company sizes. We intentionally wanted to get as broad a group of folks as possible together. One of the things we did just right off the bat was that these business leaders felt like they didn't have the type of information that they needed on the economic side in North Carolina to really understand what was happening. So we built what we call a decision dashboard for tracking statistics in North Carolina that included not just the health information cut in a way that we thought was very informative, but really focused on the relationship between that information and other business and economic variables, as well as things like socioeconomic vulnerability, to try to get as holistic a view of what was happening in the economy as possible. So one quick example that we did was we created an index that we call the Consumer Consternation Index. And the idea was this pulled together a bunch of different data series to try to track the ability and willingness of consumers to undertake non-essential activities, so essentially things away from home. So what we realized when we looked at the data was that economic activity actually collapsed prior to the official shutdown orders from the government, from health authorities. People got scared, they got scared fast, and they stopped doing things away from home. And we realized that the flip side of that was that for the economy to rebound and get back to where it was pre-pandemic, people were going to have to feel comfortable, personally comfortable, undertaking non-essential activities away from home. So we measured things like foot traffic to, parks and retail locations, a variety of different indicators that would give us some indication as to, how people were feeling about their kind of safety in some sense to go out. How concerned were they about going out and undertaking non-essential business activity? And it's interesting, this indicator has done a very good job leading economic activity. So we watch it closely. We provide weekly updates to the data that's on our dashboard and plan to continue doing that for the foreseeable future. And we also add expert commentaries that contextualize some of that information, especially as things change. The second big project that we did with the CEO Leadership Forum was what we call 7 Forces Reshaping the Economy. It was a big report where there's so much going on, so many different things happening. We were trying to make sense in a more cohesive way as to what this really meant for the economy currently, as well as going forward. And the process for doing this was we basically said, okay, we're just going to create a laundry list, just catalog everything that we see as being, a disruption, some sort of important thing that's happening in the economy, and then try to distill that down to a fundamental set of forces, as small a set of forces as we think explain all of these different things that we're seeing. This was a challenge. It took a lot of people. We had probably 40 plus people that provided input into this. So academics, policymakers, the folks that were part of the CEO forum. But a lot of it tied back to what you would think of as entrepreneurial activity in different ways. And so with that, I want to kind of just take a step back and start the rest of this discussion with a very fundamental question. Like, why is entrepreneurship important, right? So if we think about what does it mean, what does starting a new venture mean? In some ways, it's a really inefficient process, right? There's no economies of scale when you start. You have to bear all these fixed costs around, setting up a new business, setting up a new venture, HR and legal, and renting space. And if you ask entrepreneurs what they spend their time doing, they regularly say they spend a lot of time doing things that aren't core to their innovative business practices. And if we think about the risks of failure, we know lots of new ventures fail. There's sort of lots of frictions and lots of deadweight costs associated with entrepreneurship. So, with my economist hat on, I think the natural question is, why don't we have innovation that's centered in existing organizations, right? Why don't we have entrepreneurial efforts, that don't have to bear all of these frictions and deadweight costs? And the answer is because innovation is a key aspect to entrepreneurship, and it seems to happen better in small startup entrepreneurial entities. So, and especially radical versus incremental innovation. So there are these big economic gains that come from the entrepreneurial process, even given how messy and risky it is. So now let's think about, when is innovation most important? It's not when an economy or an industry or society is just humming along and everything's hunky-dory. I mean, innovation's still useful then. There's still, things you can do to be more productive, create new businesses, but that's not when it's most important. It's most important when there's some shock that disrupts the economy. So by definition, this disruption, the shock, reshapes the economics of business, and it provides opportunities for innovation to solve the new problems that are created by the disruption. So, sometimes innovation itself causes the shock. So we see this in the tech industry with things, like the internet and smartphone and social media, but very often the shock is external. So, can we imagine a year with more external shocks, more disruptions than 2020? I mean, first, of course, there's the pandemic itself. Then there's the economic disaster that's caused by the stay-at-home orders and the business shutdowns. Then we have social unrest and rethinking some of the most fundamental issues in our society around equality and fairness and opportunity. And then, of course, there's the election and political uncertainty. So, in many ways, 2020 has created this amazing opportunity for innovative entrepreneurs. But the flip side of that is, of course, it's been a horrible year for many entrepreneurs and small business owners. Anyone in an industry that was negatively affected by the disruptions I just mentioned, especially the pandemic, has faced very serious challenges. And many of these challenges were overwhelming. We expect hundreds of thousands of businesses to permanently close in 2020. If you look at small business activity in the US, it's still 25% below pre-pandemic levels. And so these are really devastating shocks for many businesses and entrepreneurs and their families. So going back to the 7 Forces document, the report, this was really an attempt to make sense of this disruption, right? To understand what's changed and what opportunities does this create. So I don't have time to go through all of the report in detail. I encourage you to download it off the Keene Institute website. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pick a few of the highlights and ones that I think are especially relevant for entrepreneurs and important for North Carolina entrepreneurs. So the first force, and we can go to the next slide now, is we call it change in work, travel, and migration patterns. And so really probably the biggest impact on everyone from the pandemic has been kind of where and how we go about our lives, right? So from a work perspective, lots of people are stuck at home, or if they go to work, the nature of that work has changed in many cases. So one of the lessons out of this, which I think surprised a lot of people, was that the technology, type of technology we're using right now for remote working has proven pretty effective for many people. There's a lot of folks like myself who can still do a lot of our job remotely. But I think there's a growing sense that technology is unable, or at least existing technology, is unable to replace the value creation from in-person spontaneous encounters. So, given the growing strength of the gaming industry and emerging technology, software, AI type stuff in North Carolina and the Triangle region in particular, I think there's an opportunity for technological innovation and, let's call it the remote productivity software segment, something like that. And I think this expertise can extend to development of better technologies for virtual and hybrid conferences and events and symposia. I've done quite a few on different platforms now, and I think there's a lot of good platforms out there, but no one's really come up with a killer app yet that really lets people do everything that you would like to do in a simulated in-person conference. The second force, and we can go to the next slide now, is what we call accelerating shifts toward on-demand and at-home retail. So, of course, e-commerce has been a growing economic force for decades now, but there was just a sudden spike in activity and in both the depth and breadth of goods and services that were provided in an online format. I think the opportunity here for entrepreneurs is that there's clear evidence of shoppers increasingly seeking, call it high-end, boutique, locally sourced, customized goods and services. So it's not just, paper towels and, commodity type goods. Like, people are looking for more interesting things to consume online now. I think this generates opportunities for specialty goods and services. North Carolina is good at this. I'm thinking things like food and agricultural products, furniture, personal care products, textiles, healthcare, financial services. And these are products that don't necessarily need to be sold just to people in North Carolina. They can be sold nationally or even internationally, as people become kind of desiring more of these types of specialized products. So the key there is to figure out, how do we be a differentiator? What's the differentiator for folks in startup businesses and North Carolina startup businesses to penetrate what seems to be a rapidly growing, fairly new market. The third force, move slides now, is what we call onshoring and widening of supply chains. So lots of businesses, especially large global businesses, realized that they had long, thin, fragile supply chains. And there's been a real attempt by businesses to think about how to create more resilient and robust supply chains. And here, I think there's opportunities for North Carolina. The state can benefit from its geography in logistics and wholesale supplier market. North Carolina-based facilities are able to serve a pretty large geographic area efficiently. The Triad region in particular has substantial unused or underused former manufacturing space, and though kind of much of that space would need to be significantly upgraded, it benefits from good access to utility and rail and highway, air transportation infrastructure. So, you might think, oh, it's going to be big companies to do all this, but the way supply chains work, they rely a lot on suppliers, and so there's really lots of opportunity for small, mid-sized businesses to grow in this this movement towards widening and onshoring of supply chains. The fourth economic force, we'll move to the next slide now, we call renewed focus on diversity and dismantling systemic racism. So, obviously a huge issue right now in larger corporations, but I think, it's something we're going to talk about today and tomorrow as well, that there's a real need for small business entrepreneurial ventures to think about how is racism affecting these ecosystems. There's a couple of things we've identified that I want to mention, and maybe these can be a part of the discussion later as well. I think they will be. So I think the state could benefit by quickly, I would say, moving towards more effectively executing on existing programs to increase contracting with minority-owned and especially Black-owned businesses. These programs exist, but they haven't been very effective. So I think the infrastructure is there. We just need to be more deliberate about how the state approaches the opportunity. Another logical area to focus is on procurement by what we call anchor institutions. So anchor institutions are geographically immobile employers who have significant procurement needs. So think universities, hospitals, military bases, things like that. And they often rely on large suppliers outside their region. So while anchor institutions sort of already have a big economic footprint in their local economies just because they're big institutions, they can also have an opportunity to play a pivotal role in ensuring the long-term prosperity of the regions in which they're located. So anchor institutions can lead economic recovery efforts in a very powerful way by redirecting procurement to spending areas that were disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. And these don't have to just be geographic areas. They can be other ways of thinking about the ecosystem. So African-American, Hispanic, Native American communities and businesses owned by those groups. And then furthermore, I think intentional procurement strategies committed to kind of both supplier diversity and local economic impact will have positive spillover effects to the local economy and sort of build more resilient and equitable economic ecosystems broadly. The fifth force, can move slides now, is what we call upending of education and childcare. So anyone that has kids is brutally aware of this at this point, right? We've all become math tutors, and I've got a high school senior, so I'm a college counselor and a standardized test tutor at this point. But it's interesting because North Carolina has developed a variety of innovative and high-value online educational programs. So I'm sort of tooting our own horn here because at Keenan Flagler, our largest graduate business program now is our online MBA program. And we have a rapidly growing online Masters of Accounting program as well. And I think the state can leverage this expertise and what other universities are doing as well to become a leader in online higher ed. So, as the model rapidly changes to embrace online learning, education technology is going to be a differentiator, right? So investment in newer platforms, again, go back to to some of the strengths that we have here in North Carolina, gaming industry, social media technologies. Like these are going to provide better student experiences and command a premium in the market. So I think North Carolina can leverage its expertise to develop truly innovative products in the ed tech space. There's also going to be a movement, we think, towards greater demand for year-round school options that would be technology enabled. So to the extent that we can develop new technologies that facilitate remote education with less parental supervision, I think those are markets that are prime for new products. And the last one that we have identified, which is sort of interesting, is North Carolina has a pretty young population of highly educated people that right now are quite underemployed. And there's this rapidly developing thing that some people call tutor pods, which are small groups of students that work remotely with a tutor. So it's interesting to think about how we could leverage that type of work. So we'll just quickly go through my last couple points here. The sixth one is one that isn't a surprise to anybody. Is shocks to healthcare and pharmaceutical demand. So obviously there's been big shocks across the healthcare industry. And I think there's places where North Carolina and startup businesses can really compete here. One that we've identified is teleservices. And I think many more people are aware of that. And there's a lot of efficiencies in that industry. And it's going to be a growth market, and it's a growth market that can extend well beyond the borders of the state. And then the seventh force is what we call risk assessment risk reassessment by capital providers. And we have a large financial services industry in North Carolina, and it's in many ways the financial services industry, and especially traditional things like lending, have really been upset by the pandemic. Just basic age-old things like credit analysis, trying to understand how credit-worthy people are, has been disrupted because this is an economic downturn unlike no other. And businesses where you thought you had a good handle on how risky they were saw revenue go to zero in some cases. So the flip side of that is that we've had a lot of success in the fintech space in North Carolina, and I'm thinking of companies like Avid Exchange and Encino. And clearly a growing ecosystem in Charlotte that really demonstrate North Carolina's potential to be a national leader in financial innovation.